Hello there. So today we're going to be talking about actors in international relations. So let's get to it. So here's what we're doing in this mini lecture. I'm going to be reinforcing what is international relations and broadly define the actors in international relations. Some of the key actors that I'm going to discuss here are sovereign states, international organizations, non-state actors like multinational organizations and non-government organizations, and emerging actors in international relations. And then we're going to finish up with a little summary of the lecture, some of the key takeaways. So here are some of the key definitions that we're going to keep thinking about as we learn more about IR, international relations, and these actors that we're talking about here. One more time, find different ways to define it, and we're going to go back to it. We're going to have a definition on the glossary that you can always go back to. But here's another definition for international relations. Right? International relations focuses on understanding how different key actors engage with each other, shaping the dynamics of diplomacy, conflict, cooperation, and the resolution of shared challenges within the international system. Right. So this one is a definition that I kind of focus more on the actors involved. Right. But you see, like it's all about this relationship of power between states and other non-state actors as well. Right. So in the context of international relations, actors are the entities or participants that play distinct roles in shaping global affairs. These actors can be broadly categorized into these three main groups: sovereign states, international organizations, and non-state actors. I'm going to talk more about these as we keep going here in the slides. So I'm going to keep it at this, but I'll go back to these definitions as we keep going. In IR, the cornerstone actors are sovereign states, or states for short. So we're going to use this states throughout the semester. States are the fundamental building blocks that shape the dynamics of global politics. Understanding the role of sovereign states is essential for understanding the complexities of diplomacy, conflict, and cooperation. As mentioned before, states are independent political entities with defined territories, governments, and population. We will talk more later about the difference between a sovereign state and a nation, but for now, think about it as the countries you hear in the news. Another important aspect of being a state in modern day IR is that you must be recognized by other states. For example, South Sudan has been a state since 2011. That's our last newest state, when seceded from Sudan to form its own country. There's a lot of conflicts going on there still, and part of it is because of this independence and sovereignty that exists now. South Sudan can only be counted as a state because other countries agree that they are a state. In contrast, Western Sahara is a region occupied by Morocco that is a recognized state and would like to be recognized as its own state, but has not been able to do so. Therefore, Western Sahara does not exist as a state by itself. We're going to explore more these ideas of recognition of states later in the semester, but for now, just think about this as states being these independent political entities that have influence in global affairs. Another key actor to think about are international organizations. These are entities created by states to facilitate cooperation and address common challenges at the global level. They serve various purposes, and here are just some examples. There are many, and we're going to talk about many of these during the semester too. For example, economic cooperation. The World Trade Organization is an organization that is created by states to address trade issues. For security, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the United Nations are good examples of that, of collective security issues. Again, we're going to talk about these later in the semester too. And the interactions between specific aspects of state interest. So, for example, the Interpol, which is the international organization created to coordinate police operations that cross borders. And the International Organization of Securities Commissions, who are a group of these regulators across the world that meet to talk about standards, global standards, and interactions and exchange information about that. Here's a key point that you have to remember about international organizations. States create these organizations and give as much or as little power to them as they want. So any state can choose to leave the UN if they want to, right? We're going to talk about here like why they don't. We hear a lot of criticisms about the UN, for example, about other ones, but states complain about it, but they're still in it. We're going to talk more about that later on. But again, states are the ones that create international organizations, so they have a lot of influence on how they operate. And again, this goes back to the idea that the states are the primary actors in global politics, the ones that we have to always go back to, because that's the beginning of any discussions about international relations. Here's another category of actors that influence international relations. They're called non-state actors. These are entities that are not sovereign states, but still hold substantial influence and agency in the international arena. The main examples here that we're going to talk about are multinational corporations, non-government organizations, and subnational entities. There are more other actors here too, and you would argue, I can argue that influential people will fit here as well. Think of Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or somebody like that. But they also operate within other organizations as well. But let me focus on this, and then we can talk more about these other things later in the semester too. So here's some examples of non-state actors: multinational corporations. There are organizations, companies, for-profit companies that operate in more than one country. And have to deal with politics and things in different countries that influences how they do business, right? So again, I think this is pretty easy to think about in the U.S. context. Apple, Amazon, any other organizations that are multinational at this point, Microsoft, any of those, right? So multinational corporations are they are an old and a new thing, right? So you can go all the way back to the British government creating the East India Company and things like that. But the way we think about from the capitalist system that we have in the 20th and 21st century, they're kind of a new thing. Then we have non-government organizations. These are non-profit organizations that operate independently of any government, typically in this context here for the purpose of addressing a social or political issue. And then we're thinking specifically of transnational NGOs, and a subcategory of those are transnational activist groups. Like Greenpeace, Transparency International that deals with corruption in different countries, and Human Rights Watch, for example. It's important to think about how local governments, cities and states, and other subnational entities also have impact. In the U.S. context, we can think about what happens in California. Standards in California have major impacts all over the world, right? Same thing for Texas, for example. Large states can have a larger influence, but really every state, every subnational unit has trade delegations, for example, right? So I put a link here, an example here, from November of 2023, Governor Walz led a trade mission to Australia to promote Minnesota businesses, right? So that's something that the government does. These are subnational entities that don't have a direct connection to the state, right, to the federal state, but also influence global politics in different ways. And this happens in other countries too. I have friends in Brazil who are in politics, and they do these trade missions as well. They're representing their own state in Brazil to try to bring more business there. So I'm from Goiás State, which is a state that is known for agriculture. So they go to other places to try to do trade deals with countries, but to their state specifically. So these are non-state actors. Like I said, there are other actors that may be important too, but these are the key ones that we're probably going to talk more about during this semester. I wanted to quickly emphasize two things that we need to think about too as we keep going this semester and thinking about these ideas of international relations and actors. One is emerging powers, which are state actors that are influencing world politics in new or in different ways, and non-traditional entities, especially those connected to technology and technological changes, right? So, for example, China, Brazil, the Gulf states, and India are just some of the examples of the states that I can think about from the top of my head. China has really, we're going to talk a lot about China in this class, has really changed the dynamics of how the world works, really, in ways that have challenged Western entities, Western ideas, and Western institutions that were created before. Same thing with Brazil, same thing with the Gulf states, how they're using their oil to change how they are perceiving the world, also to change how they live their lives to a certain extent, and how they influence politics. And non-traditional entities, I have some here now: hacktivists, hackers in general, cybersecurity aspects, cybersecurity groups. Again, I'm focusing on these ideas. These are fairly new ideas, right? So, I mean, they've been around for a while. China, Iran, the U.S., the EU always have had cybersecurity analysts for a long time. But this is becoming more influential and more important on how we think about actors and how we think about international politics and international relations. So, and in some ways, like, these non-traditional entities are sometimes undermining how states are the primary actors. I think of Bitcoin, for example. So the decentralization of finances is something that can have an impact in the near future. But I'm personally very skeptical about the impact. But there is an impact, right? But the states are still important. Dollar still matters, right? But those are things that we got to think about. We're going to talk more about in class as well. So emerging actors, emerging powers, and non-traditional entities. So those are the main points for us to start to think about actors in global politics in international relations. So we'll use the word actors to think about the entities influencing international relations. These are not like people necessarily. These are entities, institutions that are going to influence, right? The same way we're going to use states to mean a country, right? So again, hopefully we're going to keep getting used to this nomenclature so we can use that throughout the semester, right? This is a basic summary. We'll delve deeper into some of these throughout the semester. And the key point here is that states still matter. The state still matters, and is still the main player, right? So they create international organizations. They are really still like the main players. However, new non-state actors are gaining importance, including local governments, groups, cybersecurity groups in general, and non-government organizations and activists and things like that. So that is it for today. Thank you.